NFL, the Dolphins expected to hire Packers defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley as their head coach. That's the latest from our Matt Zenitz. Hafley reuniting with new Dolphins GM John Eric Sullivan, who recently came over from Green Bay. Hafley replacing Mike McDaniel, who was fired after 4 seasons in Miami. He does have head coaching experience in college, was the head coach at Boston College, but had a losing record over 4 years, then went back to the NFL and did a good job with the Packers over the last 2. Let's take you to Miami now. Hard Rock Stadium, home of the Dolphins, site of tonight's national championship game. Charles Davis and Danny Cannell standing by. Charles, this is a guy who did not succeed at Boston College, but came back to the NFL and did enough at Green Bay to get this kind of opportunity. What are the Dolphins getting in Hafley?
Well, what's interesting to me, and Danny, you've seen Jeff Hafley come up through the ranks, is I think that if he had stayed at Boston College, things would have continued to move in a positive direction. There's a lot of discussion about when he left. They thought they were making great progress, and they felt like they had to take a step back. With Green Bay, he was really making progress on the defensive side. And as you know, Danny, Michael Parsons got hurt. And now the dominoes start to fall. Injury here, injury there. The numbers aren't the same. But I remember Matt LaFleur was the offensive coordinator of the Tennessee Titans. They were 30th in the league in offense. He got the job in Green Bay, and you can't say he hasn't done a fantastic job there.
He's done a phenomenal job. First of all, you throw out the time in Boston College. It might be one of the hardest jobs in college. It's just a really hard job. I remember talking to Jeff Hafley when he was the defensive coordinator at Ohio State. This thing I think is interesting about this. Oftentimes, if you ever have a dating history, you might date one time, it's a rough breakup. You know, if you like tall blondes, all of a sudden maybe you go to like a 5'7" brunette. This is about as opposite as you can get from what they had in Miami and Mike McDaniel. Like Mike McDaniel, a little bit looser locker room, player-friendly coach. Hafley's going to be all business, and that's what this team needs. They needed somebody to come in a little more buttoned up. By the way, offensive mind, now they have a defensive mind. So I think there's some things, there's some very clear reasons, the connection to Green Bay with Sullivan. But I think this is exactly what the Dolphins need inside that locker room, is this leadership.
Very quickly, based on what Danny is saying, and we've seen this oftentimes, you often hire opposite of what you had. You need a change in your locker room and direction. The defense was pretty darn good under Anthony Weaver. They did some nice things. But I think what we're saying overall is we need this locker room to know that this guy's in charge, and this is how it's going to be. And by the way, get ready for some match quarter coverage that you're going to see next year with the Miami Dolphins.
That's all well and good. Defensive guy. Obviously, the defense is something that can take you to a championship game. We're seeing that in the 4 teams that are top 10 in defense that are remaining in the NFL. But it all comes down to the quarterback, right? And so you've got this Green Bay to South Beach pipeline. Danny, as the quarterback, I'll just throw this out to you. Malik Willis is a free agent. Any chance that you see that as another one from that Green Bay to South Beach pipeline here with these guys?
I was on HQ last week, and we were doing quarterback landing spots for where they could possibly be. And this was when Sullivan was already hired. I said keep an eye on Malik Willis then. Now that you have this guy, I think it makes total sense that you get somebody that you're familiar with, that he knows he can trust, a young playmaker who I still think has a lot of really good football in him. Probably came in as and remember his drop in the draft night. Everybody thought he was going to be a first round. Then he drops to the third. And then he was kind of thrown to the wolves in Tennessee, and it didn't work out. But how many times have we seen quarterbacks, it just takes a little bit of time to mature and grow up and learn what it's like in the NFL. I think if they do make this move, I think it makes a lot of sense. They could have an instant playmaker on their hands.
I feel like I dropped in on a game of a movie Fiddler on the Roof. When they were singing Matchmaker, Matchmaker, Make Me a Match. You two have done an excellent job in doing that. And here's the other thing. Defensive coaches, you know what they hate in quarterbacks? Quarterbacks with movement skills. Quarterbacks that move around. They often go get what they don't like to play against. That's why Malik Willis makes a lot of sense. But one thing we do have to keep in mind, Tua Tagovailoa's contract. That is a massive cap hit. We saw Denver absorb the major cap hit for Russell Wilson and move forward. Is Miami willing to do the exact same thing with Tua? Absorb this major hit and try and get your franchise back on its even footing.
And not a potential out until a year from now. Over $56 million against the cap in 2026. Charles, that's obviously the biggest question for the Miami Dolphins moving forward is Tua in that quarterback position. But what might be number 2 on the checklist for Hafley in this new regime?
Well, to me, it's what Danny outlined earlier. Walking into that locker room and outlining exactly what we're going to get done here. Because if you go back to the early days of Mike McDaniel, when the flash and dash was working, when they put 70 points on a September game on the Denver Broncos, who later were one of the top defenses in the game, but the adjustments were slow to come later as good teams got comfortable with the speed and the flash and dash. Jeff Hafley's going to bring a different discipline to this team, plus the ability to mix and match, not just on defense, but that's what he's going to ask his offense to do as well.
I hope that
Devon Achane is very happy about this hiring.
Absolutely. I don't know how Tyreek Hill feels about it, and that's another contract.
I don't think they're that worried about it, frankly.
Okay,
I really don't.
But
I think that's going to be something they're going to address and deal with. But I don't think that's primary for them.
But I also think they've got to be preaching patience to the fan base, because I don't think this is a quick. We've seen a lot of worst to first this year, and I'm sure that gives some Dolphins fans hope. But I do think this is a team that's strapped for cash already. They're behind the 8 ball with the salary cap. You've got Tua's deal you got to worry about. So I think this will be more of the long play for Stephen Ross and ownership, and just looking at the upside of what Jeff Hafley could bring. It's hard to sell a fan base on upside and being patient, but I really think this is going to take a little time for Jeff Hafley to sort of put his identity and his fingerprints on this team.
Danny's right, but he's also right about how hard it is to sell. Jacksonville 4-13 to 13-4. New England back-to-back 4-13 years to 13-4 and are still playing. You can preach patience. People want to see results a lot quicker in today's NFL.
And they don't have a top 10 pick. They've got the number 11 pick in the draft. We have a bunch of players that you're going to be seeing tonight on that field that could go on the first day, will go on the first day, will go number 1 overall, maybe a couple in the top 5. When, geez, I mean, you would think you couldn't write it any better if somehow Mendoza ends up with the Miami Dolphins, but that would mean way too much draft capital to trade up to number 1 to get him. He's likely on his way to the Vegas Raiders. But when you look at those guys on the field tonight, Mendoza the number 1 prospect, and then a drop down to Carson Beck, Danny, what do you see at the next level?
Oh, I mean, I think the sky's the limit for Mendoza, and I'm just mad that the Miami Dolphins didn't listen to me, because I wanted them to flop for Fernando. I said that mid-season. I was like, the Dolphins need to tank so they could get him.
That's really good alliteration.
Right?
Too.
I mean, they kind of tanked for Tua was there at the time. You know, we've seen those throughout history, but I think Fernando Mendoza is as close to the real deal as you're going to get. He's tall, he's 6'5", he runs, he's mobile. That's kind of the new era, and he's very smart. The ability for him to come in and execute this offense in 1 year at the level he has been outstanding. Carson Beck, I think, has probably the most to play for tonight on this stage as far as it goes for the